GameStop employees, what are some of your horror stories? A woman came in to trade an old Xbox 360 in a box. I opened the box and the smell hit me. Rat droppings, grime, cockroaches. It was obvious all had spent time in this thing. Luckily, my manager noticed and we were able to decline the trade. I spent 5 minutes disinfecting the counter before helping the next customer. One time I was trading in a PlayStation 4, I think. We were chatting while I was wiping his hard drive and commenting on all his achievements. Sometime during the conversation, he got nostalgic and changed his mind, but not before I had already deleted all his data. Felt terrible. One homeless-looking guy came in during one of the few times I was alone in the store. He was dragging around a trash bag, and I was doing my best to keep him in eyesight as he was all kinds of sketchy. He managed to stuff an Xbox 360 in the bag and walk out, but I ran out and asked him to give it back, which he did, saying, "Please don't call the cops." The last one kinda shook me. This woman came in with a gaggle of kids, maybe 4. They were all terrors, running around to different parts of the store, yelling, grabbing things, and rearranging them, seemingly causing distractions while the woman tried on 3 separate occasions to get behind the counter. They ended up buying something, but then I noticed that under this big box the oldest kid had picked up, he had stuffed his hands full of the little DS games that were in the go-back section on the counter. There was more to it, but I've lost some of the details. Still, it really gave me the impression that this was all coordinated by their mother. It is one thing to see adults steal, to see kids encouraged to do so is just terribly, terribly sad. I was an assistant manager when one of the Madden games came out, 2004, maybe. We were doing a big midnight opening for it, and everybody was having a great time waiting for the game, which we were picking up from another store about 30 miles away. Around 11 o'clock, after people had been waiting for 2 hours after the mall closed, I got a phone call. The game was not coming. I almost broke down, sitting behind the register, dreading the thought of telling everybody that they had just wasted their time. To make matters worse, another store within walking distance of us got their games. I just wanted to die that night. I am so grateful that our customers took it well and did not get too angry. Had a couple come in to return a Sesame Street video game and a controller. They had a receipt from over a year ago, the game was scratched to hell, and the controller was full of dried soda. They said it did not work anymore, shocker, and were furious when I would not give them their money back. Like standing there screaming at me, I was the manager, so I had no one else there to back me up. It was crazy. Their kid was bawling, the lady was swearing like a syphilitic sailor, and the husband could not finish a sentence. Pretty sure they were both super high too. So that was fun. When the PlayStation 2 came out, I was assistant manager and my manager would sell them out of the back room at a markup. Such a snake. I took the demo Xbox home with a copy of Halo before the system launched one night and had a 4-player all-night party. One of our other local stores had someone dig through the outside wall and steal everything out of their back room. One time a woman screamed at me because her kid was tearing open a toy before paying for it and I kindly told him to wait a little bit. She seemed on the fence about whether she wanted to buy the toy or not for her kid, so I was definitely not glad that her kid was already ripping it open. She then proceeded to scream at me for being really awful with kids, a horrible person, bad at my job, etc. She also said she wanted to complain to the manager if I ever talked to her kid like that again. Then she angrily paid and walked out of the store. Also, people tinkering or modding their console and then trying to return it because it does not work anymore, angrily insisting they bought it that way at GameStop. Worked part-time at GameStop while I was in college. The best story I love to tell is the mom and son story. 40s-ish mom and 7 to 10-ish boy come into the store, in a large strip mall with lots of stores, do not even look at merchandise, come up to the counter and ask to let the kid use the bathroom. Clarified she is not there to buy anything but has spent thousands of dollars in our store previously. We politely tell her we can't let customers use our bathroom because it's in the back of the store with lots of high-priced merchandise. That's the policy. We have cameras and corporate reviews the footage. Another story I have where I was wrongfully terminated substantiates that one. Additionally, what we do not tell her is that all the used game consoles that people sell back to us were stored in the bathroom. There was 1 month prior to Christmas I had to do some impressive yoga to get to the toilet. I am sure those consoles were a hazmat, but I digress. Not to be unsympathetic to this kid's plight, we tell the mom that the pizza place next door lets people use their bathroom if they buy something, and the cheapest thing is a $1 soda or bottle of water. She starts flipping out on us and spewing expletives, telling us she's paid our salaries 10 times over and that we're going to hell, yada yada yada. Then, no joke, tells her son to just go. Kid actually unzips and pees all over the carpet in front of my register. Then they left. I've never been so grossed out and dumbfounded. Had to close up for the day and half the next day while GameStop paid to have our carpet sanitized. Resulted in a loss of pay for the weekend. Wonder what happened to that kid. He's gotta be in his 20s by now. A gentleman comes in to buy one of our old 360 bundles, used, the old system that required the HD. He brings it back a few days later and complains that it doesn't work. We start our normal troubleshooting methods in store. We couldn't figure anything out. So I do a swap, take his old system in as defective, then sell him a replacement bundle. I go through and try to wipe the system so we can ship it back to the warehouse. Cockroaches start crawling out of the system instead. I freak out. Throw the system in one of our giant shopping bags, throw that in a box, tape it shut, and throw that in another bag. My manager tells me to just shrink it out, meaning we take the loss, and destroy it in the back. I take it out to the parking lot and have to throw it around to destroy it. These cockroaches freaking scatter like marbles on a floor. I'm dancing around the parking lot on my tiptoes to avoid the flood. It was awful. I also have another story to tell. One of my regulars was a skunk farmer. I worked at a store that bordered 2 states. In State A, where the store was located, we were in a nicer area. We were extremely close to State B's rural community. State B had its own store an hour away from ours, but we were only 15 minutes from the state line. It was easier for State B residents to come to us rather than go to their own store. Mr. Skunk Farmer raised skunks. I don't know why, or how, but every time I'd see him, about twice a month, he'd show me some photos of the babies, or of their new pens, or of whatever shenanigans he was trying out on the farm. I remember he wore overalls that he had his wife embroider a skunk onto the front pocket or something. I worked at GameStop for 3.5 years. We all have seen some strange things, I promise you all that. Not an employee, but I was waiting in line to buy a game, and a guy came in with his 8-ish-year-old child I assumed was his son, and pointed the kid to the Nintendo section as he went over to PlayStation. I was daydreaming, off in my own world, and it took me a second to realize a moment later that I was hearing water splashing. I turned around to see the kid projectile vomiting all over the floor and the Nintendo games. The employee at the counter, the lady in front of me, and I all just watched this child empty his guts onto the floor before the father came up to the son. "You okay, bud?" "Yeah, alright, let's get out of here." And without a word or even looking at anyone else, the two leave the store. Once gone, the 3 of us exchanged wild looks, and the employee told us it was his first day running the store on his own, and he didn't have any cleaning supplies or know what to do. Poor guy. Parents, please don't let your kids throw up in GameStop. I worked in a store where theft was a very common occurrence. But this one dude, he nabbed one of the cheap controllers off the wall from the back of the store, puts it in his backpack. Then comes over to the counter, reaches across the counter, opens a drawer, and steals a brand new game out of the drawer. Takes it away from the register, opens it, waits in line, trades the game in for $25. Then he asks me to look for something in one of the bottom drawers and he steals back the game he just traded in a second time. After that, he immediately left the store before I could notice he was gone. I gotta give him credit, he had some slick balls. So many other sketchy things too, but this one I just had to laugh at. I got 2 stories. Quick one is a guy who would come in all the time to ask about or buy obscure Vita dating sims and ask inappropriate questions like if the next Dragon Age, at this time it would have been Inquisition, was going to, finally, have sex scenes in it. Next one is New Year's Day, miserable I'm working already, it's super early and the first customer of the day, of the whole year, is this like 7-foot tall guy who comes in asking for AV cables for a PS4 because the one he just bought didn't have one. We immediately tell him the PS4 only uses HDMI and so it wouldn't have AV cables, even confirming with him, "You mean those red, yellow, and white cables?" He starts getting mad and asks again for the cables, which we again tell him don't exist. Maybe there's an adapter or something, but I've never seen one and we don't have them here regardless, maybe check Best Buy. Guy immediately starts screaming, "You racist motherfuckers, get me this cable. I'm homeless, I just bought this thing for my grandkids. You're all racist white devil fuckers." Thankfully I froze in fear and confusion and my boss took over and just scooted the guy out the door. Hell of a way to start the year. I was hired to help open a new store. A store where the manager was male, and everyone he hired, female. He was definitely trying to cultivate a hot GameStop kind of situation. Word got around, and we had people coming in to visit our store when they had other stores much closer to where they lived. They did not really buy anything, they kind of just lurked around for hours at a time, chatting the staff up. There were days when they would wait for us to close up, that was kind of scary. I was eventually let go for not being friendly enough, which was apparently about 3 months before the manager had a total screaming meltdown during store hours, declared himself High Archangel, threw some stuff at a customer, and was later picked up by an ambulance. So I guess my horror story is, the whole damn job. My first job was at GameStop, early 2000s. I stayed for about 4 years from when I was 17 to 21, started as a part-timer and ended up as a shift supervisor. Then boyfriend, later husband, now ex-husband was our store manager for a while. The point is I have seen some shit. My favorite one. It's a weekday afternoon, so we're slow and short-staffed. It's just the two of us, my boyfriend and I, and maybe a customer or two. Someone is playing the Guitar Hero demo, someone is browsing the wall. The door jingles, and in walks a guy with a huge backpack. I give the customary greeting, "Hey, welcome in, let us know if you need anything," and he doesn't acknowledge or respond. I shrug to my boyfriend, go back to cleaning discs or stripping cases or whatever. The guy looks around for a few minutes and we think nothing of it. Finally, he comes up to my boyfriend and gestures for the stack of post-its he's using to label games we're putting in the disc buffing machine. Boyfriend obliges, guy says nothing, just writes on the post-it. He puts it on the counter in full view of both of us, and in all capital letters is the following message: "I have gun, give money." Boyfriend and I turn sheet white and realize we are being robbed and this guy has a gun in his giant backpack. We are teenagers with no manager and no silent alarm under the desk and we are fucking terrified. The guy is already putting down the backpack and unzipping it. The other customers are totally unaware and off doing their own thing and we are going to get murdered in a GameStop at 1 PM on a Tuesday over the $100 we have in our tiny ass till and the safe neither of us have the combo for. He reaches in the backpack and withdraws a light gun for a Sega Dreamcast. Turns out this guy is deaf and wants to sell us a fucking light gun. I once had a lady and her teenage son come in to trade in several DVDs and games they had just stolen from the Walmart behind the strip mall where our store was. A Walmart employee called me to ask if they were in my store and said the cops were on the way, so stall or do what I could to keep them there. I said sure. I told them the cash versus store credit value of their items without mentioning that I could not even take them because they were still wrapped in the cellophane. I walked them around the store and talked about which games were the best value for the money, etc. The cops showed up and asked them to step outside, and I just smiled and went back behind the counter. They followed the police out, and one officer came back a minute later to get the merchandise. Last I heard about it, not a horror story, but definitely weird. Then there was this wealthy couple who had 3 kids, and each kid had a Wii, a PlayStation 3, and an Xbox 360. They would pre-order every major game that came out for each system, always the deluxe edition. They spent a ton of money in our store. And they were crazy. So abusive to every employee, they cussed at us and called us stupid, they would ask for things they knew they could not have and then throw a fit, they would scour their receipts for anything that could be a mistake and make you explain it to them over and over. I went to work at a different company and they came into my store there, and got in line for my favorite cashier. I immediately called a manager over when it was their turn to check out, explained how I knew them and that there was a 99% chance they would make the cashier cry. He went over, and just as he got there, they were beginning to raise their voices about some supposed mistake. Luckily, that manager is super good at handling people and got them out without letting them get a word in edgewise. I practically had PTSD from dealing with them. I think they got off on abusing people together. They would sometimes be laughing as they did it. If they found a legitimate mistake in anything, their faces would just light up. Truly evil people. This was 2007 or so. GameStop had a used game return policy, 7 days no questions asked, full refund. People would abuse this constantly, like a rental service. We knew it, and we were able to flag people who did it too often and decline them the returns, manager policy, not company policy. Then there was this one lady, old woman, gaggle of grandkids. Seemed so sweet, was very nice to us while in the store, asking for help, recommendations, etc. Bought them a PlayStation 2 and a freaking gigantic stack of games, had to be 20 to 25 at least. Her total came out over $400. I rang her out, handed her the multiple bags of stuff, and said to the kids something along the lines of, "Wow, you guys are lucky to have such a great grandma. This many games will last you months." The grandma chuckled and said, "Oh, they're only in town for the week. You guys have that 7-day return policy, I'll see you in 6 days." I was an ASM for about a year, had done retail before. Our store was right in between a fairly upscale touristy part of town as well as some of the poorer neighborhoods, so we got all sorts of people. I'll tell one horror story and then one uplifting story. The holiday season was in full swing and we were always crowded. This particular day we had a few seasonal hires in to help with the workload and I was behind the counter pulling games as people came up, to make the transactions faster. Then suddenly a smell hit the entire building like 100 cats had peed in the air conditioner and someone had tried to get it dry by stoking a fire with burning hair. My seasonals looked at me with a mix of confusion and terror as a family of 4 approached the counter and it slowly became apparent that they were the cause of the smell. I've been noseblind before from staying with an aunt who used to be an animal hoarder, but this was far worse. I sent my seasonals on break, grabbed the hand sanitizer, pumped a small mountain of it into my hands and as casually as possible smeared it on my upper lip, hoping my facial hair would hold onto it and block the smell. It mostly worked. I was already in holiday rush mode but this was the fastest I ever got a used Xbox 360 and GTA 5 packaged and ready to go. When they left, we noticed that the store had actually cleared out of all other customers, who also couldn't deal with the odor. My SM came out of the back, gave me props for not embarrassing them, and promptly proceeded to fill our store with Febreze. Okay, one uplifting story. We had our regular customers and over time we would get to recognize a few people and have a general sense of what their interests were. Beyond just being salespeople and trying to pitch whatever was hot and new. Frequently we would also get people who knew they had 7 days or however long to trade a game back in for the full amount they paid, and would use us as a general rental service that way. We were supposed to flag their account to stop this from happening, but it wasn't common enough at our location to really care. We weren't losing money and it was better than them stealing from us. One sort of grungy guy missing a couple of teeth would come in regularly and he had a few different criteria. He owned a regular DS, he didn't have much money, and he wanted the games to be very long so they could occupy his time. Usually RPGs, but they had to have a good story. He'd bring it back if it wasn't engaging and ask for something else. The first couple of times he did this I thought maybe he was trying to put one over on us, but the games he was picking actually were too long to reasonably finish in the time he would have them. I guess I could have checked the save files, but it wasn't that big of a deal. He disappears for a couple of weeks and then one day I'm working and I get a call, it's him. It's not too busy so we chat for a few minutes. He basically wants to pick my brain about what we've got that's less than $10 that will last for a month, and if it's worth his time to come get it because his money is so tight that just driving to our store and not finding something will be sort of a significant loss. This happens to be during a week where Dragon Quest IX is on sale for less than $10, and we have one copy left, so I set it aside and tell him to try it out. My wife isn't a big JRPG fan but she tried it and it held her interest for quite a while, so maybe this guy will like it too. He comes by, gets it, thanks me, and leaves. I don't see him for months. He's one of those regulars who you get to thinking about, whether or not you would really say you were acquainted, but just that general, I hope they're okay, sort of thing. Then one day he comes back in wearing a full suit, grinning ear to ear. I recognize him right away and ask how things are going. He tells me they turned around and he got a job as a cook at a Sonic within walking distance from his house, and had been able to save his money for a while, thanks to Dragon Quest being so long, and he wanted to say thanks and to buy his mom a PlayStation 3. He knew the only games she really recognized were classics, so we picked out one of the new Pac-Man games and Namco Museum. He was looking at the price tags of a couple of other ones and I could tell he was doing some quick mental math, so I told him, pick the ones you're looking at and we'll see what we can make work. He gets one more game for his mom and brings them up to the front. It's been a few years since, so I honestly don't remember what if any promotions we had going on at the time, but wouldn't you know it? He got enough of a discount for some mysterious reason that he was able to afford everything. I worked at an EB Games in 2005. The important thing to note is that EB did not use the term used for games, but instead used pre-played. I had a woman come in to buy Sniper Elite for her husband, but I did not have any more sealed copies, just the gutted display boxes. She did not mind this and purchased it at the new game price. A few hours later, I got an angry phone call from a man who said I sold his wife a used game and charged her for a new copy. He explained who she was and I told him what happened. He freaked out and said that the game was opened, which makes it used. I let him know that we do not sell used games, we sell pre-played games, and assured him that the disc was removed from the case, sleeved, and filed, which means it had never been played and was therefore a new copy. He got loud, asked me how old I was, 18, and went off about how he was older than me and was a lawyer. He demanded that he be refunded the difference between the prices, so I told him that my store manager would be in the next morning and he could take it up with her. To my knowledge, he never called her, so I think he just gave up. I worked for Simply Mac, a company owned by GameStop. Simply Mac offered 2-hour classes for older customers on Apple software like iMovie. We worked on commission plus $9.75 per hour, and we didn't get commission for doing classes, so nobody wanted to do them. The older customers were kinda rude, so as the only 18-year-old employee, I was forced to be the designated teacher. So this 60-year-old photographer comes in and wants to learn how to make an iMovie with his photo shoots. Awesome, there goes 2 hours. We were looking at photos to import from his laptop for the movie, and he had me click on this folder. As I started importing it, hundreds of explicit images of women on dirty mattresses in a basement popped up on the screen. He started talking in a pervy voice about how pretty and beautiful each girl in the photo was. His laptop screen is facing the entire store so anyone can just walk by and see. So I taught him how to use iMovie and make a slideshow with his porn, and at the end of the 2 hours he tipped me $50 and I never saw him again. That was the most money I made in 2 hours there, ever. Former employee, 2 stories come to mind. I was opening one day, not a morning person, and had barely opened my energy drink. A woman approached the counter and went uncomfortably close to my face, then grabbed a Rick and Morty button we had on sale. She holds it up to my face and screams "Pickle Rick" and leaves. Probably cemented a resolve to not watch that show anytime soon. This one is going to sound not true, but it is. I thought I would never see one in the flesh, but a very stereotypical greasy nerd dude in a trench coat came in one day. He had a Naruto shirt and was spinning a fake shuriken, just mumbling to himself. He was in there for like an hour, didn't buy anything. I didn't help him out personally, but I was working close by as my coworker did. One of the first things he says in front of him is, "Okay, so don't look like you are addicted to meth even though you are addicted to meth. Meth is unfortunately a big problem in this area, so unsurprising." He then proceeds to have my coworker look up some fairly obscure Game Boy Advance games, sadly I don't remember exact titles, and makes really weird statements about them like, that one actually predicted what's going on in our world right now. The last thing he told us was to get some special brand of Colombian coffee that gave you special abilities. Never saw him again after that. Honorable mentions go to a dude almost threatening me with violence when I had to inform him his hat that came with his MLB pre-order was delayed in shipping, finding a used positive pregnancy test on a shelf, and a neckbeard dude smugly insisting we wouldn't have GameCube controllers even when I held one right up to him. So I worked there like 5 years ago or so. This storeroom was long and was in a populated shopping complex. I was younger, like 19, and as a senior game advisor, I could close on my own. They left me to close around a popular holiday, I don't remember which one. Long story short, I had a long-ass line at my single register, and a trio of gentlemen came in. One stood at the end of my line after browsing and picking something up, one was browsing at the front of the store. The last one snuck into the back room and stuffed his backpack with like 10 PS4 controllers, my personal iPad that was on the break room desk, and a stack of games. I almost got fired for not being aware of them sneaking in. The video, which only recorded behind the counter and the front of the store, showed how they stayed in a group and then spread out in specific spots so I couldn't track them all at once, on top of the long line of customers I was overwhelmed with. They didn't have a fucking alarm on the backroom door, which was my only defense that they listened to. I still miss my iPad. I'm female and was a shift supervisor, SGA, so I unfortunately have quite a few stories. This is probably the creepiest. I had a guy who would engage way too much with me whenever he came in, then would never buy anything. For a better mental image, he was a 20-something skinny guy with dreads and an apparent hatred of any sort of hygiene product. He would literally come in for hours at a time and do nothing but talk to me. I would ask him to leave, and he would, only to be back an hour or so later. Rinse and repeat for weeks, despite them switching up my schedule to try and deter his behavior. I ended up having to threaten to call the cops on him to get him to leave, until a few days later when he popped back up like nothing had happened. I actually did call the cops this time, but he was long gone by the time they arrived. He was banned from the store. But did that stop him? Of course not. That would require sanity and thoughtfulness. It got to the point that he waited by my car one night when I was closing, dark, around 9 p.m., I didn't even see him at first, and tried to ask me to go home with him. Luckily, my coworker I was closing with was an ex-Marine and had no problems threatening the hell out of him. I quit that job a month or so later. I guess he showed up a few months after that asking after me, hoping it had been long enough people would not remember or something. I don't know, man. Creep's gonna creep. I just wanted to talk about video games. Not GameStop but a very similar store that buys and sells games, DVDs, and tech. Among the things I saw, used condom in a DVD case, more than once, bag of needles left on the floor, dog waste, I hope, caked onto a PS3 they tried to trade in, multiple boxes full of shit old DVDs from the garage that would come to literal pennies for the seller. It cost us more to take and sort them than they would sell for, yet the seller still insisted on me checking and scanning. This occurred frequently and often took hours to resolve, with customers ultimately receiving less than 50 pence. People I saw, women who came in with stolen brand new DVDs every week. But she was polite so I liked her. A crazy bag lady who thought working in a tech store would cause electric energy to fry my brain. So many people who just full on stank, like holding my breath while I served them stank. If you have ever been to a tech store and thought it smelled horrible, I promise it's not the staff's fault. They paid me exactly 5p above minimum wage for under 21s. I was overworked and undertrained. Worst job I ever had. Not a GameStop employee, but I was waiting in line at a GameStop once to buy Grand Theft Auto 5 when a really angry and somewhat heavy woman, about mid-30s, walked in and cut in front of everyone in line, loudly demanding money back for a used game she had bought. I do not know if GameStop does not have a return policy on used games or if she had bought it a long time ago, but the poor guy at the register could not give her money back. She got increasingly more aggressive and even louder, loud enough for the manager to hear and come out. He just repeated what the cashier had said, and she lost her shit completely. She threw the game case at the manager, hit him right in the face with it, then she spat at the cashier before starting to tear the place apart, like she was trying to do as much damage as possible. The cashier immediately called 911, and me and another guy who had been standing in line asked the manager if he needed help throwing her out. What he actually wanted, though, was for us to keep her in the store so she could not run off and get away before the police showed up, but we were not comfortable doing that, not being sure about the legality of locking her in. Luckily for the manager, the local police department was literally just across a large Walmart parking lot, less than a minute away, so the cops showed up before she even tried to leave. She was 100% calm when they took her. It was like flipping a switch, from a raging lunatic to calm and compliant in literally 1 second. I thought for sure they were going to have to take her down hard, but nope. Anyway, the cops took our details and said they would be in touch, but I never heard back from them. I guess between the manager, the cashier, and all the other witnesses, they did not need to talk to all of us. I am sure the store had video cameras too. I am not going to say which GameStop it was, but the whole thing made the news. Never did see a video of the incident, which was odd, but I was kind of relieved because I would not want my ugly face all over the news, just open mouth staring at this crazy woman in utter disbelief. I worked at GameStop while I was in high school, and then again for a few years during university, 2 different locations. In high school, I worked in a plaza that was across the parking lot from Walmart. I started working at the high school location when I was 16. I am a girl. When I worked there was a guy who worked in the menswear store in the same plaza who came around all the time to talk to me about World of Warcraft. I thought he was a little weird, but ultimately harmless. I was young and naive, I guess. He asked me for my contact information a few times, but I always told him that store policy dictated that I was not allowed to give it out. I went for lunch one time and was sitting in the back room eating my sandwich and watching the cameras when the menswear guy came in. I watched him talk to my manager, and it got pretty heated. There was no sound on the cameras, but you could tell by the way they were talking. When the guy left, I came out and asked my manager what happened, and he said that the menswear guy had asked after me and said some really inappropriate stuff. When informed that I was definitely a minor, menswear guy must have been in his 30s, I would guess, he said he did not care, and that prompted my boss to tell him he was not welcome back in the store. I never did find out the details of what inappropriate stuff he said. Same location once again, we were a pretty low volume store, so a lot of the time, there was only one person working. It just so happened that I was working alone one day when some dude came in asking to return a PC game. We could not return PC games at all. The return policy at GS was already pretty strict, but PC games were the most strict, because most of the ones we sold at the time still had activation codes in them, so once it was opened, the code was used and it was yours. This guy seemed, I do not know, drunk or something. First he said he did not like it, then he said it did not work, then he claimed he had never opened it, despite the obviously broken seal on the box. I told him that I could not return the game, and he flipped his shit. Started yelling, cursing, threatening me, all kinds of things. And I was alone in the store at the time, just me and him. He literally attempted to lunge over the counter at me. It was kind of a slow-motion moment in real life, and I remember asking myself as he was coming toward me whether I would get fired if I punched him in self-defense. Thankfully, I did not have to, because he was a rather rotund man and he bounced off the corner of the counter instead of going over it. Another customer came in, some guy built like a football player, saw what was happening, grabbed the dude, and literally threw him out. So when I went to university, the mall location that I worked at was one of the busiest locations in the country. We had just gotten a new manager from this small, sleepy little town nearby, and he had no idea what he was in for. It was October or something when he started working there. We, the other employees, immediately told him that it was a little later than normal for hiring the Christmas temps, but he still had time to get them in and trained on time, and he needed to do it immediately. He decided that we did not need Christmas temps. His reasoning was that our current store had more permanent employees than his old store had, including temps for the Christmas rush, so we would be fine. Except, you know, for the fact that we were one of the busiest locations in the country. It was miserable. He did eventually admit his mistake, but not until it was way too late. Another story from the university store involves a pre-order gone wrong. So this was for one of the Rock Band packs that came out, whichever one came with the keyboard, I forget. The publisher had originally announced SKUs for the game, a bundle with the game and a piano, a bundle with all the instruments, and then some of the instruments separately. We started taking pre-orders. Later, the publisher decided that they did not want to produce the bundle that contained all the instruments after all, so we were forced to call all the people who pre-ordered that bundle to let them know. The problem with this is that people often provide their home landline number to us, so when we call, someone else, not the person who pre-ordered, will pick up, take a message, and never deliver it to the right person. It seemed that this is what happened to the lady who arrived on release day to pick up her pre-order for a bundle which did not exist. I get it, that sucks for her. Still not a reason to throw the debit machine at me, though.